On the night of April 18th, 2021, at around 7:40 p.m., an Australian man named Mitch Cooney was driving down the Hume Highway in Bardia, Australia. He was returning from a racing event and heading home to Gold Coast City, when completely out of nowhere, he saw a childlike figure standing in the middle of the road. The figure was wearing a blue parka, and from the few seconds he was in view, it looked like he was trying to cross the highway. Now, Mitch was driving at nearly 60 miles an hour, or around 96 kilometers per hour. He was also towing a large toy hauler behind his car. Trying to brake or suddenly move out of the way in these conditions would have certainly resulted in a devastating accident, so Mitch had no choice but to keep driving. Fortunately, he managed to avoid the mysterious figure by mere inches. Fearing the safety of a potential child wandering the Hume Highway, his mother, who was also with him at the time, contacted the Australian police almost seconds later. The officers online assured them that they were putting patrols out immediately. However, Mitch couldn't stop thinking about what he saw. Trying to do everything he could, he called the police again at 8:29 p.m. and offered the dashcam footage he'd captured of this figure. But to Mitch's surprise, the officers told him that they swept the area and actually found a young child matching the description he provided, and that he was being returned to his home as they spoke. What a child was doing in the middle of a highway at night, miles from the nearest civilization, was still a big mystery, but at least he was safe now. As Mitch put it on Facebook later that night, "I felt absolutely sick when all this happened. I instantly felt so much better when I was told the kid had been collected." However, just when Mitch thought everything worked out okay, things took a wild turn. After confirming that the kid was safe, Mitch uploaded the video from his dashcam onto the internet, hoping to share the unnerving encounter he had with others. But as the video and his story gained traction, the New South Wales Police Department came forward and announced that they didn't find any child on the highway that night, completely contradicting what they had told Mitch that night. According to the official report, they scoured the surrounding area for nearly 8 hours, searching until 3:45 a.m. before finally calling it off and finding no trace of a child nearby. The department stated that multiple cars attended and commenced a search of the area. However, no child was located and the search concluded. Now, there's no reason to believe that the NSW police would lie on an official report like this. What's more likely is that the person talking to Mitch earlier didn't know the full details and just made things up. Or maybe it was nothing more than a terrible case of miscommunication, where the police searching for the child somehow got twisted into them already having found him. But if the child was never found, what happened to him? The answer to that question, however, could be anything. Maybe its parents noticed their kid missing and took him back home, or he could have been potentially kidnapped by someone who saw a child roaming the highway alone at night and took advantage of the opportunity. Though none of those theories explain how the child got to that spot in the first place. Unfortunately, the case remains an unsolved mystery to this day, and with so little coverage, it's unlikely we'll get answers anytime soon. On May 8th, 2021, TikToker Pissed Pasta, real name Malie Perales, was returning from a night out with her friends and roommates around 2:30 a.m. However, what was supposed to be a fun hangout took a disturbing turn when, while driving down the Packard Drive Northeast Road next to the Rogue River in Belmont, Michigan, one of them spotted a shadowy figure crawling onto the road.
What the f***?
Stop. No,
Stop.
I'm not. No. Hell no.
What the f***, dude?
No.
They were soaked.
After discussing for a bit, the group decided to circle back and check what it was, and this is what they came across.
There's just...
See? That was it. That was it.
She's crying.
It looked like a young woman, possibly in her 20s or 30s, sitting on the road while either waving at the car or banging her own head. She was also drenched from head to toe in 48-degree Fahrenheit or about 9 degrees Celsius weather. Malie's group circled back one more time to confirm what they saw, and this time the woman had completely collapsed onto the road. By this point, Malie and her friends had realized that this woman was likely in dire need of medical assistance, but there was also a chance that this was a setup for a robbery. So they made the smart choice and called 911 without getting out of their car. The first responders and the police arrived shortly after and took her to a nearby hospital. Malie returned to the spot they found her a few hours later, and it was still wet from the water dripping from her clothes. More importantly, she also found dig marks on the roadside near the river, suggesting that the woman had likely fallen in and swam out onto the road just minutes before Malie's group passed by. After some investigation, the police also found her car parked behind a house near the river. In other words, she most likely fell into the river on the east side and managed to swim all the way across to the other side. Inquiring about her in the Facebook group for this neighborhood also revealed that she had actually interacted with some of the residents earlier that day, though her interactions were unnerving to say the least. Saw this person between Van Dam and Packer Woods around 10:15 p.m. Friday. Asked her if she needed help, to which she responded no. Another quote, "There's another report by a guy on Douglas Street in the West Siders uniforms page who had a similar situation with a woman walking into his home this week. She walked right into someone's house yelling, 'Hello, hello, hello,' then just left. She was wandering the backyard too." Though who she was and how she ended up there is still a mystery. Over the next few days, she recovered enough to tell investigators that she was from Kalamazoo, a town that's over 60 miles away from where she was found, but she didn't have any memory of ever driving to Belmont, which sounds strange at first, but actually has a surprisingly plausible explanation. You see, this woman was a 28-year-old Chinese student named May, who went missing from Kalamazoo on May 6th, 2 days before she was discovered in Belmont. Before going missing, she also told her friends that she felt like she had a stalker. Upon hearing this, one of the first theories that comes to mind is that maybe she was kidnapped and then thrown into the river by this stalker. But it's important to note that according to the few witnesses in the police investigation, she drove to Belmont on her own. It's unclear whether this stalker was even real or not. However, the stress of feeling like she was constantly being watched likely messed with her mental state and triggered a dissociative fugue state, which, for those who don't know, is a mental condition where the person forgets who they are and often starts doing things they otherwise wouldn't do. Some even go as far as moving to other cities and building new lives before they snap out of the state and come to their senses. What makes this already unsettling condition even worse is that the patient usually doesn't remember what they did during that fugue state either. And that's what likely happened to May. She got stressed, went into a fugue state, wandered around in her car for a couple of days, and eventually ended up in the river. Fortunately, she was able to come to her senses and swim to the shore before losing her life. On the 12th of October 2016, a family in Sheffield, England, went to the Drawbridge pub for a night out, and after an evening of fun and laughter, they decided to head back home at around midnight. The roads in that area are usually deserted at that hour, so they were already on guard for any robbers or other criminals they might run into on their way back. However, nothing in the world could have prepared them for what they came across just 5 minutes later. Seconds after they rounded the corner to the Grange Mill Lane Road, a man dressed in a clown costume jumped out from the shadows and blocked the road, forcing the driver to stop. He then started waving at the car, and as soon as it came to a full stop, he started running towards it while still blocking the path forward. When the driver tried to reverse his car and go the other way, the clown started sprinting at full speed. Typically, something like this could be dismissed as just some troll or a YouTuber making a scaring people at night as a clown video, especially given that this was 2016. However, due to an incident that happened just 3 days earlier, the driver of this car had no choice but to assume the worst. You see, on October 9th, at around 8:45 p.m., a man named Simon Chinnery was attacked by a knife-wielding clown in public. Fortunately, the attacker was apprehended before he could do any lethal damage to Simon. Sadly, Simon still suffered multiple slashes to his right hand, leaving it permanently disfigured to the point of being classified as a disability. What's worse than the attack itself was that it went viral and started a craze of thousands of others trying to imitate the attacker. In some parts of the country, the police departments were receiving as many as 23 reports of people threatening others dressed as clowns per day. And while many of these imitators were nothing more than trolls who had no real intentions of harming others, there were those who took things too far. with some trying to force their way into people's cars and chasing women and children with knives. So for this driver to see a man in a clown costume blocking their car while all this was going on had to be deeply unnerving for him. Their fear became worse when they tried to flee the clown, because it started chasing them like a madman. With no other option, the driver was forced to press the pedal to the metal and hope for the best, with the clown jumping out of the way at the last second. This entire situation could have just as easily ended with the clown losing his life if he had even been a fraction of a second slower to jump away. On the other hand, who knows what the attacker might have done if the driver hadn't sped off. On June 2nd, 2018, one of the officers for Fulshire Police Department in Texas was driving back to the station after his shift, when suddenly he saw the car in front of him swerve onto the next lane to avoid hitting something. But this wasn't a tree branch or an animal. Instead, it was something that looked like the aftermath of either a horrific crime or an accident. A young woman in a blue shirt was lying down horizontally across the road and was completely still, suggesting that she was either unconscious or dead. Maybe someone decided to dump the body in the middle of the road after committing the crime. Fortunately, when the officer walked up to her, she not only responded to him, but even stood up on her own. As it turned out, she had driven her car into the ditch next to the road just minutes earlier. Later tests also discovered an extremely high blood alcohol concentration in her system. Put simply, she was driving under the influence and ended up crashing into the side. The concussion from the accident, combined with her prior intoxication, made her behave extremely irrationally, which is why she walked up to the road and lay down without a care in the world. It's nothing short of a miracle that the car in front of the officer was able to spot and avoid her in time, or she would have ended up as nothing more than a cautionary tale about driving under the influence. On the night of February 26, 1946, 25-year-old Jimmy Hollis and his girlfriend Mary Jean were returning to their homes in Texarkana, Texas after watching a movie together. But before they reached the city limits, Jimmy stopped the car on the side of the road to extend their date for a short while. What neither of them knew, however, was that this little detour would nearly cost them their lives. About 10 minutes after they had stopped, a man came out of the nearby woods and approached the car. He was wearing a white pillowcase over his head with 2 small holes for eyes. The rest of his face was completely hidden from view. He told Jimmy to get out of the car, but Jimmy initially believed that this was a prank of sorts and didn't pay much attention to it. The masked man then pulled out his firearm and pointed it towards the couple, stating, "I don't want to kill you, fella, just do what I say." Understanding the gravity of the situation, Jimmy got out of the car as the masked man instructed. As soon as he did, the man swung his weapon at Jimmy's head, knocking him unconscious. Mary tried to run away into the woods, but the man caught up and did the same to her. Thankfully, before he could go further, he got spooked by a set of approaching headlights on the nearby road and ran away. Mary immediately ran to the nearest house and asked them to call the police. Jimmy also regained consciousness and hailed down a passing car to ask for help. However, by the time the police arrived on the scene to investigate, the man had vanished without a trace. Jimmy and Marie were taken to the hospital where it was discovered that the strike had fractured Jimmy's skull in multiple places. Fortunately, he was able to recover without any lasting injuries and describe what he remembered from that night. Both he and Mary gave the same statements about the overall build of the masked man, that he was around 6 feet tall and fairly slender. But for some reason, the two couldn't agree on his ethnicity. Jimmy insisted that he was a Caucasian, while Mary stayed adamant that he was of African origin. This contradiction, along with the seemingly unprovoked nature of the incident, led investigators to incorrectly believe the couple knew the man and were simply trying to protect him. What they didn't realize was that while Jimmy and Mary survived to give a description, the next couple wouldn't be as fortunate. About a month later, on March 24th, a man was driving down a secluded road on the outskirts of Texarkana when he noticed a car parked on the road ahead. From a distance, it looked like a young man was sleeping in that car, slumped over on the steering wheel. However, as the driver got closer, he suspected that something wasn't right. So he pulled over to the side and walked up to the other car to try to wake him up, only to come to a scene far more horrific than he could have ever imagined. Put simply, The young man had already passed away long before the driver stumbled across him. He also noticed a woman in the backseat who had sadly suffered the same fate. Police were called to the scene, and they quickly identified the two as Richard Griffin and his girlfriend Polly Ann Moore. Both were killed with shots to the head. Unfortunately, the only evidence investigators were able to gather from the crime scene was a single .32 caliber cartridge, and while they didn't know it at this point, this incident was also the doing of the same man Jimmy and Mary had encountered a month earlier. The police finally made this connection on April 14th when another couple encountered the same man while on an isolated road, and they were killed with a firearm of the same caliber. News of these three incidents quickly spread through Texarkana, putting all the residents on high alert. Fearing for their safety, most residents stopped driving at night entirely, while the remaining made sure to avoid empty roads at all costs. The masked man was also given the name of the Texarkana Phantom due to his inability to appear and disappear without a trace. And true to his name, he was becoming harder to track with each passing day, even after the FBI got involved. After 2 more months of fruitless searching, one of the investigators noticed that the vehicles were stolen shortly before each incident and were found abandoned not long after. Following this lead led to a man named Ewell Swinney, a car thief with 2 felonies to his name already. His height and build matched what Jimmy and Mary had described earlier. More importantly, when an officer tried to arrest him for the 3rd time for car theft, he claimed that he knew that the officer wanted him for more than stealing cars. Unfortunately, investigators weren't able to find any evidence linking Ewell directly to the 3 haunting road encounters. Luckily, his prior felonies allowed prosecutors to give the harshest punishment for his 3rd theft-related offense and sentenced him to life in prison. That being said, Ewell continued to deny any involvement in the 3 incidents until his end in 1994, leaving the Texarkana Phantom encounters a somewhat unresolved mystery to this day. On the 8th of January 2024, a truck driver was driving on a remote stretch of highway in Western Australia when at around 11 p.m., this driver had the most unnerving road encounter of his life. Nearly 62 miles south of Perth, he saw what looked like 2 people dragging something across the highway. They showed up almost out of nowhere, forcing the truck driver to swerve around them at a dangerous speed. But by the time he stopped the truck and looked back, they had already vanished into the surrounding darkness. Which begs the question, what were they dragging and why? Unfortunately, the answer to both these questions is extremely ambiguous. For starters, it's extremely difficult to identify what exactly they were dragging. Going frame by frame, we can see what looks like the legs of another person wearing shorts and black shoes. So maybe the 2 people were trying to hide the primary evidence of their horrific crime. But in motion, it looked more like an animal or something in between. It could even be a life-sized plush, though that doesn't explain its very human-like proportions. Regardless of what it was, however, an equally important question is why 2 people would drag something across a highway. On September 16, 2018, an Uber driver from New York shared the terrifying encounter he had with an angry man on Long Island. He was about to complete a ride when, out of nowhere, another car drove past him at a very high speed while barely avoiding a collision. But before the Uber driver could even process what had happened, the other driver slammed on the brakes and parked in the middle of the road, blocking him from moving forward. He then got out of the car, ran over, and started bashing on the windows, telling the Uber driver to get out.
What's going on? What's going on?
I don't know.
What is that?
What's that?
You blew the fucking right leg. Get the fuck out of the car right now.
Just
not
go,
getting
just
out
go,
there.
go, just go, just go, go around him. Go.
It's unclear if this was simply unprovoked road rage or an attempt to rob the driver and his passengers. Not wanting to find out the answer, the Uber driver made the correct decision and backed up to find a different route to his destination. However, there was no way for him to predict just how relentless the other driver would be. As soon as the Uber driver changed routes, the other driver got in his car as well and started chasing him no matter where he went. Things went from bad to worse as they approached a red light, which would have given the other driver a chance to catch up and do something terrible before the police arrived. But in a remarkable stroke of luck, the Uber driver found a cop already waiting on the other side of the intersection. They were able to explain the situation to the officers, resulting in the other driver getting arrested for driving while intoxicated.
Stopped the car, got out of the car, was trying to fight with me. So I backed up and turned around, and he was pursuing me. And these girls
Call 911.
These girls called 911, and the officer pursued him.
Put simply, the other driver wasn't thinking clearly and could have been armed. If the Uber driver had panicked when he first approached, all three of them might have lost their lives.